broadcast to the wider audience, and certain conduct is unacceptable, and that will not be tolerated. Should any person not wish to be recorded, I advise they should leave the meeting prior to any statements being made. Any defamatory statements made are not the position of council remain an individual's opinion, and council accepts no responsibility for any defamatory statements, and all liability remains with the person or individual making those remarks. So we'll move on. Mark, would you like to, Councillor Sutherland, would you like to do the acknowledgement or welcome to country?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. On behalf of my family and community, I'd like to say Yama, Yamade Gomeroi, Walla Barganiani, Winungalava, Lanku Murray, Maramara, Hale Darwin, Dilia Yanbali, Garinamadis Kaingul Gomeroi, Ngamranginda, Winalanginda, Winangalawa, making sure that we always pay respects to the land that we're on, the land of the Gomeroi people, and pay our respects to the elders, both past and present, who have cared and still care for this beautiful country. Care for this country that's lasted for over 60,000 years, maintaining songlines and rich history that stretched right across the northwest, in an accurate oral history that's still being backed up by Western science today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors and all present, if we can stand for the meeting prayer. Almighty God, we humbly beseech Thee to vouchsafe Thy blessing upon this council, direct and prosper our deliberations to advancement and glory and the true welfare of the people of the Regional Council and Australia. Amen.
Amen.
Councillors, we move into the open meeting, and I call for apologies and leaves of absence. There is none, so we'll move on to item 2, community consultation. I understand that we have one person. Oops. Sam, because you're speaking on DA matter, you have to make a declaration that you've supported any councillor or staff in terms of political donations.
Yep, no, I haven't supported anybody.
Thank you.
On donations. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr Mayor and the other councillors for the opportunity to speak here tonight. The reason why I wanted to come and chat here, we've obviously got a DA in with council at the moment. The big thing for us is not so much about what our unique one is, but from the real estate background and what we're seeing happening in the local area at the moment is that we've got quite a shortage of housing, whether it be people looking to buy and people looking to rent. So this is why we sort of looked at doing 2 dwellings on one lot. And we really think moving forward, what I know council at the moment are going through, especially with the CBD LEP at the moment, and I think in the future with the moving further out into town, that we're really support from a real estate perspective that these smaller lot sizes are a good thing moving forward. Obviously, a lot of regional areas have been set on a higher lot size for a long time because everyone wanted the big backyards and the pools and things like that, where we're seeing from a professional side a lot of people, even younger people, looking to move to regional areas, and they're not necessarily got the time or the desire to have these sort of big backyards or a lot of maintenance. They want to be able to go away on the weekend and just sort of makes it easier for them. So obviously having a couple of dwellings on one lot, it allows it to be a cheaper cost of living, cheaper rent, and that's where we've found over the last probably 3 years now that there is a big demand in Tamworth for rental properties of that sizing, and hence why myself and Kayla, my wife, and my younger sister Sarah put this application through to council to buy the 2 lots. So that's all I wanted to put forward, and I really think that moving forward, what council's got plan is really going to help Tamworth move to the Blueprint 100. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Sam. There are no other speakers that I'm aware of. We'll move on from there to the minutes from the previous meeting. Could I have somebody move those? Councillor Mears, Councillor Southwell. Any comments on those minutes? No comments. Those in favour of receiving those minutes, or say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Councillors, we'll move on to item 4, disclosure of interest. Now, is there anyone here tonight who would wish to disclose an interest? Councillor Southwell.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'd just like to make a disclosure of interest in terms of a non-pecuniary but significant conflict of interest, as my siblings are putting forward the development application, which we're hearing tonight in items 7.1 and 7.2, so I'll be leaving the room for those items.
Thank you, Councillor Southwell. Are there any other disclosures of interest? There being no other disclosure of interest, we'll move on to item 5, the Merrill Minute. There is no Merrill Minute tonight, so we'll move on to item 6, and we have two notices of motion from Councillor Brooke Southwell. So, Councillor Southwell, would you like to move your notice of motion?
Yes. Stand up. Yeah. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would like to move that notice.
Yes.
Just with a slight amendment in terms of, instead of calling it a Revenue Task Force Advisory Committee, if we could change the name to a Revenue Task Force Working Group, just to avoid some of the legislative requirements of a committee. It makes it a little bit more informal. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Tickle, do you want to speak to that motion?
Yes, please. As highlighted in the report, look, our council is facing significant financial challenges, particularly due to the impacts of COVID-19, cost shifting by the state government, rate capping that is less than inflation, and the requirement to replace assets with up-to-date modern infrastructure. What council is currently doing is absolutely fantastic in terms of revenue generation, and this is definitely not, saying to council staff in any way that we're not doing a good thing in that area, but we can always do more, Mr Mayor, and this particular report, it's actually quite timely in terms of some of our other reports tonight, particularly in relation to our Blueprint 100, which is a draft report which will be on exhibition, because it does relate to one of the key things within the plan, which is to provide services, facilities and infrastructure and programs that meet the long-term goals of our community. So in order to achieve this, we must look for innovative ways to build on our revenue in line with our revenue policy. Look, there's been a little bit of comments within the councillors saying there's no need for this, but I think there is a strong need for this, because as you know, we as a manager of a large business such as council, we're often in workshops and we don't have enough time to actually look at how to create revenue. So we need a dedicated team that looks at best practice revenue streams throughout Australia and the world. This actual notice of motion also relates to the UN sustainability goals, which is what we are aligning all of our strategic documents with. And it also relates with a lot of our focus areas, including a prosperous region, innovation, and open and collaborative leadership. So we also talk about tonight, which is in the annexures, our assets. An example of where this revenue could help is one of our assets is in the aquatics category, which is currently poor or very poor asset. So creating revenue like this and looking at research to include best practice ideas to raise revenue so that we can match state and federal funding will address this concern, among others. There is a report that's been done, the Strengthening Local Government Revenue Background Paper, which was by the Australian Centre of Excellence in Local Government. It talks about the need for councils to increase revenue. And that's really all I'm asking for. What's the worst that can happen? We have a number of meetings and maybe we don't find any new innovative revenue streams, but I think it would be a great committee, and I encourage as many councillors to be involved and other community members. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Southwell. Anyone speaking against the recommendation? Councillor Berg.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to move an amendment. I wanted to move the amendment on the original motion. I think it still applies with your amendment, Councillor Southwell, that you've put in, but I'll run with it as it is anyway. The amendment is that, and I've got it, I hope it's able to be put up on the board there, so that we request a councillor workshop for the proposed Revenue Task Force Advisory Committee to confirm the need for it, to determine the staff and councillor membership of it, and to discuss the terms of reference that, that would be involved in such a committee. And with regards to the item in the business paper, already there's been some bad media pick up on it in terms of being inaccurate, not bad in terms of the intent of the motion, but bad in terms of inaccurate reporting, suggesting that we've got a 3.2 million black hole, which is, I'm sure, not Councillor Southwell's intent of putting this in the business paper, because I know that she understands that's not the case. But this links to other problems that we've had at a couple of meetings previously, where we've requested IPART to have the rate variation to fix that deficit that we were looking at. And I think that the community could unintentionally be drawn to think that there's other things that we're not doing as a council that we are doing, and are doing very, very well in terms of our revenue generation. And I think that referring it back to a working group to discuss this in the first instance would mean that the proposal may not be lost, put to a vote, but also give all of the councillors a chance to understand the whole issue a lot better and come up with a better outcome that can come back to a subsequent council meeting.
Can I have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Coates. Anyone wish to speak against that amendment? Councillor Southwell.
Yeah, I wish to speak against it. I don't think there's a real need to have a meeting to talk about another meeting. It's like just not necessary. I think that increasing revenue due to the reasons I've already outlined and the reasons within the report is quite important, and it's a 12-month meeting. I just don't see the point of having a workshop to talk about having another meeting. I see that as a bit of a waste of my time. Thank you.
Anyone wish to speak to the amendment? Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I guess my comment mainly, obviously it was based on the council papers that we received, which spoke about the committee and who would make up that committee, etc. And I do support the amendment of a workshop, because I feel we need to actually discuss options as to who may be and whether it's appropriate to have community members there and expressions of interest. So I actually support the amendment that Councillor Burke has actually put up.
Further discussion? Councillor Bear.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. I was certainly would support the original motion with the change from the task force advisory working group rather than a committee, because a committee has bureaucratic and legislative requirements. I will support the amendment, because I think otherwise it'll go down. I think that'd be the worst thing that could happen to this council, is to be divisive in that area. So I would certainly support the fact that we have a workshop, because I think it's imperative and we owe it to our community to actually look at how we are looking at revenue sources to make sure that we are doing everything we possibly can in these fiscal times that and moving into some very I'd say challenging economic times for the whole nation and the world. And I think if we had a workshop on it to have a look at the need and move forward with a properly balanced strategy, I think that's got to be the way that we've got to go. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Bear. Further comments? Councillor Ryder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I tend to agree with Councillor Berg in relation to the amendment, purely because I don't want the message to get out to the community that we are looking at ways of getting our hands in their back pockets to get more of their hard-earned cash. They're already doing it tough, and I think there is that. It'd be good to understand what direction we're going in relation to revenues, and have it all on the table. But I think, and I understand the intent is good in relation to sourcing funds for some of those big ticket items that the council would like to progress. But I worry about the impact on our ratepayers, because it doesn't take much to get the message out there that we look like there was that black hole, talk of the black hole, and then now there's talk about raising revenues, and I think that concerns me. And so I'm more than happy to support the amendment, so we can understand the intention of a committee if it was established by council. I also wonder about the impact on the staff, because I believe that many of the staff are already doing many of the functions of probably a committee like this in relation to probably sourcing grant funds for projects. They always provide us with fiscal information at most meetings, and I think that would it be, and keep in mind that such a committee might then have to review all of the financial records of council prior to then being put before a council meeting. And I wonder whether it's best that we discuss the implications of such a working group or committee prior to actually agreeing to one.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Mears.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to support Councillor Southwell in the original motion, and also with the amendment that she did make. I've had lengthy discussions about this, and I think from my perspective as well, it was a motion that was put in for the right reasons. We were actually discussing how we value add the council as opposed to raise significant other revenues from our constituents. It was about developing something similar to the guide.
We're talking about the amendment.
Yep, okay. So, again, as it's been said, stop the motion going down. I'd be happy to support Councillor Burke's amendment, and hopefully that we can then discuss more in detail of what it is and bring it back to council again to.
Further comment then? Thank you, Councillor Mears. Further comment? No further comment? There being no further comment, then I'll put the amendment. Those in favour?
Aye. Aye.
Those against?
Aye.
Might get a show of hands. Those in favour? Those against? The amendment is carried. The amendment now becomes the motion. Okay, we have the motion now. I'll put the amendment, which is now the motion. I'll put the motion. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you. We'll move on to item 6.2. Second notice of motion, Councillor Southwell. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, thanks. I'll move the motion. This was something.
Can we have a second?
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Betts. Yes, you can speak.
Okay. Thanks, Mr Mayor. The reason for putting this motion is it was one of the first meetings where we had to basically highlight which committees we were going to be on. As a new councillor, I had expressed interest in this group, but at the time there was only one nominee who was able to be on it, and I was very supportive of my colleague, fellow councillor, Councillor Mark Sutherland. However, I guess now that I've kind of been in the role for a few months, after speaking with you about how we can simply write a council report if we want to be added on to committees, then that is what's driven me to request to be added on. I did speak with a number of members, including the Mayor of the Youth Council, who was supportive of this, basically saying that any support that can be given from the broader council would be fantastic. I've got a broad range of experience in youth work. I've written a youth strategy. I've gone on several international youth leadership courses, and as the youngest female councillor to ever be within Tamworth Regional Council, I think it'd be great to have both male and female representation on the committee. Thank you.
Speakers against? Councillor
Sorry,
Hughes.
Mr. Mayor, in supporting the motion, and I guess it's more of a comment than a
You're not speaking against, you're speaking for.
As the motion stands, I would like to, I'll put an amendment in if I can. I have no objection to increasing the number of councillors on that committee. I think it's a great idea.
So do you want to move an amendment so we
Yes.
can talk to it?
Move amendment that we change the wording to be similarly to the raise the inclusion of additional councillors on the youth committee to allow more councillors to participate.
Do you have a seconder for that?
Mr Mayor, would you like me to make comment?
Yes, can I ask the General
so-
Manager to make some comment?
Councillor Mears, just on your motion, I probably should point out that any councillor can attend any committee meeting at any time. You don't have to amend the way that committee is formed, but as any councillor you can participate in any committee, unless it's a committee that's formed by legislation. So there are some committees that have to exist and they have stipulated membership, but as far as council committees go, any councillor can attend any committee meeting at any time, including the Youth Council. And what normally happens with our committees is, so if there are a number of council law representatives, the councillors elect a chairperson. That chairperson then becomes the spokesperson for that particular committee. In the case of the Youth Council, it's a little bit different because the Youth Council is chaired by the Youth Mayor, and the councillors are there in an advisory capacity, and obviously to provide that linkage between the council and essentially a fairly autonomous body, even though we can ask them to do certain things. But having the single delegate from council that's actually the delegate to the Youth Council removes any ambiguity around who the spokesperson is then between council and the Youth Council. That would be my only comment. But certainly you don't need to have an amendment that allows any councillor to attend the Youth Council because every councillor can already.
Further comment. I'll have to go to Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I take on board what the General Manager has said, but a number of our committees, I realise this is a youth council, but most of our committees have more than one council delegate. Is there any reason why we can't have two council delegates, a two-part motion maybe, two council delegates on the Youth Council, and separately to that the second delegate be Councillor Southwell? Alternatively, this position's come up in September. We renew the delegates to committees, so it could be fitting at that point to have the wording that we have two delegates from council, and then it's open then to who those two delegates are, as all the committees are in September.
Councillor Tickle, am I taking from you want to move an amendment to say that if there is, in terms of this motion, you would support it as an alternate delegate?
No, it's a second delegate. Like many of our committees have two delegates, some have three. So is there any reason we can't have two delegates on the Youth Council? I know you're out to you outline some.
So absolutely not. And you could say you want 5 members. And when it's a council-formed group, the council can amend the makeup of that group at any time. There's only those ones that are formed under legislation that you can't. I guess my only comment here would be that, like I said, we have councillors that are chairs of committees and they then become the spokesperson for that committee. In this case, if you had multiple delegates that are advising the Youth Council and the media made an inquiry, somebody would have to be the nominated person to make comment, because you'd have 2 delegates of equal standing because neither will be the chair. So it would just be making sure that there's not a feed off and getting 2 different answers about, council and whatever else. Somebody would have to be identified as the spokesperson.
We have a policy in place which has the commencement of these of the new council and the committees, and that was that the chairperson of that committee be elected prior to or at the first meeting by the councillor, by those delegates, the council delegates, not the committee as a whole.
But through you, Mr Mayor, Councillor Tickle, in this case, the councillor is not the chair. The youth mayor is the chair.
Yeah, very different. Councillor Bed.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, I support the notice of motion, and I support Councillor Southwell's inclusion in that. The only thing I'd say, because I totally understand what the General Manager's saying, Councillor Sutherland was the original nominated member, that Councillor Sutherland will be the spokesperson in his absence, Councillor Southwell, but it needs to clarify, not that it's a chair, but it's the spokesperson. And that's, I think, it overcome it, because I think this youth council, in my time, has been one of the best. It's matured, and we're getting to a point where we're really engaging with the youth of our community, and it's absolutely important that we give it total support. And I think by having two of the younger councillors and new councillors on it gives it a fresh sense of appeal and a perspective, and I think totally support it. So thanks, Mr.
Councillor Betts, while you're on your feet, would you look for an amended motion to talk about if this is supported, that Councillor Brooke Southwell becomes a... how would we do that?
My advice, Mr Mayor, is I would just let that be an agreement between the two councillors that are participating as to who is going to be the spokesperson on any particular item.
Thank you, Councillor.
There's not really any issue there.
Councillor Boo.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and I think that Councillor Betts's proposal in lines with the General Manager is a solution to the issue that's at hand. But can I just talk about process? We came to this particular chamber and we deferred a decision to appoint committees on the first night that we met. We subsequently had 2 further workshops. We had a whole lot of horse trading to fill up to, I think, 30 odd committees. We agreed that we didn't all get our first pick. Some of us didn't get our second pick, but we were given committees to serve on. And I just find that we're jumping out of step with our process and our behaviour, and it doesn't sit comfortably with me. I won't vote against it on this instance, but I think the work that we did has just been flown in the breeze, and I don't like it one little bit. The second thing is it was setting a precedent. Are we going to get other councillors say, well, I really want to be on the other committee because I really like that one as well, for whatever reason. And the third one that I don't like, or thing that could come out of this, is councillors actually saying, I don't want to be on a particular committee. And so there are risks involved in this. I will support it this time, but I think that it's not appropriate. I believe that we workshopped this, that we deferred it from a council meeting they've already said, and we didn't all get our first picks. I think that we should suck it up sometimes and move on, and we all can go to any committee meeting that we want to anyway.
No, sorry, Mr Mayor, just more of a question, which I'm just wondering, in relation to the terms of reference for that committee, would it permit the addition of additional...
It's not really a committee, Councillor Ryder.
Or that
The
group.
council.
We'll have to refer to the General Manager for that.
So the terms of reference for that group, does it permit additional councillor delegates?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the terms of reference refers to one councillor. However, it is up to council to alter the terms of reference should it see fit. So it is with you, councillors, to decide.
So thanks, Councillor Ryder. Before I go to Councillor Sutherland, I'm going to ask the General Manager and the Director, if this was to be put up and gets up tonight, we're going to have to include something in there about amending the terms of reference.
Mr Mayor, I would just assume that that's an automatic thing. If the councillors indicate that they would like to have a second representative, we would automatically amend the terms of reference.
Okay. Councillor Sutherland? Paul?
Mr Mayor, I just want to speak in support of of the motion and the inclusion of Councillor Southwell on the Youth Council. I think the opportunity to be able to support such an amazing group of young people has been phenomenal. And I think that from some feedback that we've had with them the last couple of weeks, the mentorship that they've been able to receive back from having that councillor involvement, they're really grateful for, and the conversation that they've had with me and saying that they're supportive of Brooke, Councillor Southwell, to add that additional support and to really provide that level of mentorship and relationship building, which I might not be able to provide from a personality perspective, from a gender perspective, from just being able to support young people in that position. So I'm fully supportive of another councillor coming on board to support the youth.
Thanks, Councillor Sutherland. Any further comments? There being no further comments, I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Councillor Southwell, you're now a member of that group. We'll move on to item 7, in open council reports, environmental and planning, and item 7.1. Could I have someone move that recommendation? Councillor Betts. Seconded by Councillor Burke. Councillor Betts, do you want to speak to that? Anyone want to speak against the recommendation? Anyone want to you want to speak against the recommendation?
Mr. Mayor, through you. My concern is that we're significantly altering the section that says that the block can be down to 450, and I know, excuse me, I have the responsibility to decide whether to reduce that or not. But I think, having looked at the plans and the design, I don't think there's anything wrong with them, and the work that council's done has been exceptional, and the developer. My concerns are that and I know it doesn't state it's an open slather from this point, but if we've got someone putting in a proposal to reduce that 450 block by 17% and a further motion later at 19%, where's the slippery slope end? Do we have someone coming in next week with, let's reduce it 20%, 25%, 30%? I know demographics are changing and people's expectations are, but a lot of people move the country for the space. And we've already got multiple occupancies considered for the region as well. I just think if we take that block size down in excess of 15% or more, then we're going to have a number of developers coming in with the same proposal, and it may not then be in the best interest of the people of Tamworth.
Thank you, Councillor Ayres. The Director, will you make comment on that?
Mr. Mayor, I think this case, this application is almost exceptional in this case because of its location on the corner, and I think that makes it different, and that is why we can positively look at the smaller size allotment. Also because we have before us not just a subdivision, so we could get a subdivision with no proposal for the actual development, and then that would also be unacceptable because we couldn't work out whether the smaller lot would allow a proper dwelling and open space and amenity. But because we have the subdivision and the actual development of the dwellings as one development, we can see what the outcome is going to be. And I think that's where it makes it an acceptable development despite the non-compliance. And I would only say that each of these would be looked at on its merits. So should we get another one in the future, and again, if the variation is more than 10%, it would again come to the council for a decision. And our report, and certainly the report from the staff, has involved a lot of thought and consideration, and would do so with any future applications.
Thank you. Further comment? Councillor Rodder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I tend to agree with Councillor Mears in relation to amending lot sizes, and I've not historically been pleased to support amendments to lot sizes, particularly on some of our newer subdivisions where they've gone from 4 to 2 or 2 to 1 or 1 to quarters and things like that. But I will support this because it is in an urban area, and I don't think ultimately it would be out of place in that part of Tamworth. But yeah, certainly I agree with Councillor Mears and in relation to his concerns about the possibility of letting the cat out of the bag and then having more developers say, oh, well, you've done it with that, and surely you can. There's the president. You're going to do this one, but. Yeah, obviously, yes, it's important that we deal with each project on its merit, but yeah, I understand his concerns, but on this, in relation to this project, I'll support it.
Further comments? Councillor Burke.
Just a question, thank you, Mr Mayor, and it's a question with regards to the relaxing of the land use requirement of no vehicular access should be permitted. Why was that in place in the first place, if we're relaxing it now?
I'll have to ask the Director to comment on that.
Through Mr Mayor, I don't know, I have to say, Councillor Burke. It's a historical thing. It was put in place quite a period of time ago when the actual subdivision was first created. And I think, as I understand it, back in those times when you had a corner block, you faced your house towards the main road, and then you wouldn't have access onto what was considered the side road, the secondary road. And of course, we're not talking now about one dwelling, we're talking about two dwellings. And it makes absolute sense for each of those dwellings to have direct access onto a road. That's about all I can tell you.
Happy with that, Councillor Burke?
Got to be. Just a comment, Mr Mayor. I think looking at the business paper that's already been changed out of an alternate lot in that street, so I can't see any reason why this one couldn't be changed as well.
Do you want to make a comment about it or no? We'll go to Councillor. No comments? Councillor,
I'll close the debate if I speak, just to make sure everyone else is.
no further comments?
Okay, thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, I support the application, and when we did the community consultation with the Blueprint 100, it was absolutely identified that we need to look at, where possible, to allow dual occupancy on some of our lots within the city boundary, because the density was a real issue, because when the lots were first built, they actually were, sort of large, quarter-acre blocks and whatever they were at the time. But the need by society now is for smaller blocks, so we need to cater for that. And it really, with transport the way it is going to go in the future, we need to increase the density in that CB, or the central area of our community. As for the precedence, it's not a dangerous precedence, this one. I think, as Councillor Mears said, Councillor Rotter said, it's something that's set not in stone for everything. It's in this, if they meet this particular requirement, it's a precedence for that, not for everyone to be involved in. But I certainly support it because it does increase the density and has basically the connotations of the requirements of the Blueprint 100. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
So councillors, that debate is now closed. This being a development matter, we have to show our position by raising our hands. So all those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against, carried unanimously. Councillors, we'll move on to item 7.2, which is a very similar application, and I'll ask for someone to move that. Councillor Betts again, seconded Councillor Burke. Councillor Betts, do you want to speak to that?
No.
Anyone want to speak against?
Just basically, Mr Mayor, through you, I was certainly against this proposal, again, based on my previous orations or comments. I think that the plans and the developments actually do stack up quite well and very take a backseat to our staff because they're the experts in this area. That it's not going to be an open slather, that each one will be based on its merit. Having learned that, I will tend to support this motion as the same as I did with the first one.
Thanks, Councillor Mears. Further discussion? There being no further discussion, again, this being a development matter, I'll ask those who are voting to raise their hands. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Could somebody go and bring Councillor Chapel back into the room? If you wish to leave, Mr Spakes, you won't be seeing it as being rude by leaving now.
I'm going to go feed some children. Thanks everyone for your time.
Councillors, we're now moving into infrastructure and services, and we item 8, and we've got 8.1. Before I call for a mover, I might ask the director to make some comment on what the recommendation says.
No, my comments are not applicable to this item. I'm happy for the council to move this one. The one that I need to make some comments is 9.2.
Oh, sorry. You're right. Okay, could I get a mover on this one? Do I have a mover on this recommendation? Councillor Sutherland, seconded Councillor Betts. Councillor Sutherland, do you want to speak to this?
No, thank you.
Anyone wish to speak against the recommendation? Anyone else wants to speak to the recommendation or make comment? I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Move on to item 8. No, we move on to item 9. Find my way through here somewhere. Councillors, Governance, Strategy and Finance. We move on to 9.1. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Southwell, seconded Councillor Betts. Councillor Southwell, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, I would like to just make a few comments, if that's okay. I've just got a couple of things to say, which is, according to the Office of Local Government, the Councillor Superannuation Discussion Paper, which was in March 2020, the Minister for Local Government, the Honourable Shelley Hancock MP, explained how this change has taken place. She explains on page 3 of the report that she undertook a workshop where the obstacles that deter women from nominating to be a councillor were identified, and the lack of super payment was one of the big barriers raised. The report also states that it can also be said that this goes some way into deterring people under 35 years of age from representing their community on the local council. So I think it is quite important, with that in mind, to have this. Not only obviously will benefit ourselves, and but also for future councillors of Tamworth Regional Council. The paper also highlights 3 main reasons why mayors and councillors should receive super payments, including to ensure councillors are adequately remunerated for their duties, and the second reason was to address an issue that councillors are denied, which is enjoyed by the broader workforce, and thirdly, that it is hoped it will encourage more women to stand as candidates during election campaigns in local government. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Southwell. Anybody wish to speak against the recommendation? Further comments on the recommendation? Councillor Betts.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. I've been in local government a few years, as you have, Mr Mayor. And when we first started off, we got $60 a month to be the privilege of a councillor. And I think most of us donated it to a charity because you were there for a community service, and we felt as though back then it was sort of an obligation to do something for the community. So you just donated the stipend back to the whatever charity you wanted. And subsequently, in years gone by, when councillors got a remuneration, I used to oppose the increase, and when we did the increase, I used to donate the increase to some community groups. But where we're headed now with local government, with the amalgamations and larger councils, and when you look at our neighbours in Queensland, the salary of some of the councillors up there is just enormous. well in excess of $200,000. So what councillors get in New South Wales is a very, very low pittance for the work and the input that they put in and the commitment that they have to put in. And to have a superannuation scheme, I think, is critical, because exactly as Councillor Southwell said, to attract, and not only just female members, I think all young people, I think it is imperative to actually put something in there that really makes it not necessarily a career path, but it is affordable so that they can participate in our democracy. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Betts. Further comments? Councillor Burke.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. In supporting the motion, I was just wanting to ask a couple of questions. One is this commensurate with what other councils are doing? The Chair might be able to help us there.
Through you, Mr Mayor, Councillor Burke, this is certainly something that's been advocated by the Local Government Association of New South Wales for a long, long time, and it has received significant support from the member council. So I would suggest the vast majority of councils in New South Wales will be taking the same position.
I know it starts on the 1st of July 22, but I would... We've had some long-term serving councillors, and I wonder if any retrospectivity has been thought of in this as well.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Mr Mayor, no, there's no retrospectivity in regard to payments.
Further comments? Councillor Sutherland.
Yep, Mr Mayor, just want to speak in support of the recommendation and reiterate what Councillor Southwell, Councillor Betts and Councillor Burke have all said, in that, you know, it's an honour to be able to serve our community in the position as councillor. And it's a commitment. It's a commitment that takes up a large percent of a working week to be able to make sure that we fulfil our duties to the level and the standard that we expect from ourselves, but also that the community expect from us. And to be able to be respected and remunerated and have that position valued by the contributions paying super, I think it goes a long way in saying to working class members of our community to be able to say that your time is valued, and we support that as any other job would. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comment? Okay.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to agree with what my fellow councillors have said. But I also, just to add to what Councillor Sutherland said, the people that vote for us as councillors expect us to do a professional job. And I think in any workplace, if we want to call it that, superannuation is part of the remuneration that you actually get for doing your job. And we do put in many, many hours a week, and I think that in recognition of the professionalism that goes with that and the expectations of speaking for our ratepayers, I actually support the motion.
Thank you. Further comment? Councillor Hughes.
Through you, Mr Mayor. I like my memory of our fellow councillors. I didn't come here because there was a massive salary at the end of the golden rainbow, but I was quite taken back when I first found out that councillors weren't paid superannuation. I think virtually every employee in the state gets that, and it's legislated to be the same. So while I didn't come here for the money, I think that my fellow councillors should be remunerated with the superannuation, because they are working, whether it's 1 hour, 50 hours a week, but we should be treated as every other employee in New South Wales is treated, and have the right to superannuation. So I'll support the motion.
Thanks, Councillor Miss. Further comment? There being no further comment, I'll just add to what the General Manager had to say in a question from Councillor Burke, and that is, this has been a topic of conversation for many, many years by local government across the state of New South Wales, and there's been much debate as to why this shouldn't have happened many, many years ago. The other comment I will make, that most boards where there's a stipend, I would say just about all boards where there's a stipend, all government boards where there's a stipend, they are paid superannuation. So councillors, I'll put that recommendation. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? Carried. We'll now move on to item 9.2, and Bruce, this is the one I think that you wanted to make some comments on before I ask someone to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, I would suggest to you that I would like to recommend to you that make 2 amendments to the recommendation as in your business paper, and the amended recommendation is up on the screen. I'll just talk to that. So, place the proposed draft documents, including amendments to the map showing the remote collection zone in the draft revenue policy. So what's in brackets in that dot point number 1? And you will have been given on your desk a plan. On this side shows the remote waste collection zone, and you might notice it's just got a grey area pretty much around Tamworth. On the other side, it's completely different. It shows a grey area spanning from the north to the south pretty much. The reason for that change is that the regional centre zone, and I hope all the councillors understand what I'm talking about, includes not just Manila, Barraba and Nundle, but places who live along the roads in between those centres, which can be serviced by a waste collection service. So that's the reason that map that only showed the grey area around Tamworth was incorrect, and this one on this side is correct. So we need to include that amendment. And then in point number 3, in the suggested amended motion, as I discussed with council before, because of the discussion we had at Niangla and Watson's Creek on the weekend, is a possibility that council may wish to change the revenue policy and the domestic waste base charge for regional remote property owners if the council wishes to keep Niangla and Watson's Creek waste facilities open and pay for that, and to receive income to cover the cost of keeping those facilities open through increasing the domestic waste base charge for regional remote. And if we don't do that, we will have to put the revenue policy on public display again. This amendment allows us to consider both. That is, if council chooses not to keep them open, then we will have a revenue policy that's got the base charge of $51. If the council does want to keep the facilities open and does want to increase the domestic waste base charge for regional remote to cover the cost of that, then council will be able to do that, and we'll be able to place that, how much that's going to be, on public display at the same time as the existing draft revenue policy is placed on display, and make a decision at the appropriate time about which one they want to pick, without going back to public display.
So, councillors, do you understand the changes that have been made there? So, Councillor Betts is the mover, Councillor Burke seconds that. The Councillor Betts, do you wish to speak to that?
Just briefly, Mr Mayor, it's got to be noted that this is just out on draft exhibition so that the community can have the input in it. And those amendments, I totally support them, because that gives council the flexibility to look at all the options so that we can bring it back to council and consult with the community. So thanks, Mr Mayor.
Anyone wish to speak against the recommendation? Anyone else want to make comment on the recommendation? Councillor Burke, I'll go around the table.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just for clarity, this is an amendment to the major document.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just, yes, I do support the amendment, particularly dot point 3 in relation to those smaller communities which have indicated unequivocally they would like their facilities to remain open, and hopefully we can do what we can to progress that outcome for them.
Councillor Southwood.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I just have a couple of three comments to make. Firstly, I agree with what Councillor Rodder said, in that we do need to be mindful of our smaller communities in Niangla and Watson's Creek and make sure that we're catering for their needs. But I'd also like to make a comment and thank the community members who have already participated in the process of community engagement for these major documents, including Blueprint 100 and all of the other documents that flow on from the IP&R process. And also encourage other residents of the community to review these draft plans. They're on exhibition for 28 days, which isn't a long period of time, so it is what's required under the legislation, I understand that. So I just encourage the community, whoever's listening tonight, to please get on, have a read. It is not light reading, it will take a little while to get through them. And please make comment and write a letter or phone us at customer service and comment on some of our key strategic documents that will drive us forward over the next short term and medium and long term. The other one is more just a comment or a question, possibly for the General Manager on notice, around some of the fees and charges. I noticed that some of the fees and charges were considerably increased, and I just wondered if it was possible that we could receive a bit of a briefing on some of those. Like, for example, underground petroleum storage systems inspections, that has dramatically increased. Residual driveway crossovers has dramatic, street banners. Although I'm supportive, I'm sure there's a reason why, and it'd just be good to get that briefing as to why those have actually dramatically increased. And the final one is in terms of our workforce management plan, just a comment around the ageing workforce program, which is quite obvious that we are having, within council we've got an ageing workforce, and there's some amazing programs going on. So that could, I know that's within, it's an operational thing, so it's not obviously something we need to be informed of, but it would, there's some great programs looking at reducing staff hours so that they're transitioning into retirement instead of completely finishing their full-time work, and then all of that knowledge is completely, lost in the organisation. So, it'd be great to engage in some of that stuff. Thank you.
Just a point of order, Mr. Mayor. Are we discussing the amendment? Has that got to be put first?
No, it's not an amendment, it is the motion.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for clarifying.
Further comments, Councillor Mears.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'm just quite pleased to support that change to motion, especially dot point 3. As most councillors would be aware, we had some very robust discussions on Saturday at both Niangla and Watson's Creek. I think it was just terrific that we did get staff out there to consult with them. One of the major concerns was that the consultation wasn't quick enough. They didn't have quite enough time. I'm just wondering if once this proposal is put on public display, if all efforts can be made to let the people of Niangla know and Watson's Creek that it's out so that they can engage in that consultation process as soon as possible.
Further comments, Councillor Sutherland.
Mr. Mayor, just in relation to the documents going out on public exhibition, just want to praise the staff, Anna and Jason and the team, on being able to bring myself as a new councillor through the process of what community consultation looks like. The kind of information that's been collected and then drafted in and now opened up for public comment and public exhibition. It's been a great insight to the process, and I'm really looking forward, as Councillor Southwell's mentioned, to be able to see what the feedback is from the needs and the views that have come directly from the community. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Further comment, Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comment relates just to the third dot point, and I concur with Councillor Mears in that having been up to Niangla and Watson's Creek, I think the flexibility that we as a council can build into our documents to allow us to reflect the needs and the desires of the communities that we are going to speak to about these changes. I think that's a really important thing, and it does allow us now to determine which way is going to be the most effective without coming back through this whole process again. So I think the way that Mr. Logan has proposed this, I think it's actually going to allow us to be far more effective as a council.
Thank you. Further comments? There being no further comments, I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Councillors, we'll move on to item 9.3, which is a late report. 9.3.
From today.
Different paper. Councillors, do you want to go to your Milo, if you haven't seen it, and you can pull it up as a late item. Councillor, I'll give you a few minutes to just...
And maybe just a heads up, Councillor, this is just a procedural item for us to have the authority to attach signatures and sign the loan documentation for something that's already been resolved, so it's just a procedural motion.
Moved councillor Betts, seconded councillor Southwell. Councillor Betts wishes to speak to it?
No.
Anyone wants to speak against it? Anyone want to make comment on it? I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you. We'll move on to item 10.1. Loan of artworks from the Visual Art Collection. Moved councillor Southwell, seconded councillor Burke. Councillor Southwell, you want to make comment on that? Anyone want to speak against the recommendation? Anyone want to speak to the recommendation? Councillor Mears.
Never short of a word, Mr Mayor, thank you. I'd just like to support this motion. I think it's terrific that we get our artwork out to the broader community. It's there to be seen and not stored in a little locked up room and sit there forever. And just like to commend the work that the library staff and the team behind them have done in getting this sort of display ready or loan ready. I know they do it on a regular basis, so all credit for them, and hopefully we get a better name around the region by lending stuff from our art gallery.
Councillors, just a quick comment from me. I think we are very privileged as a community to be the custodians of such a wonderful art collection, and to be able to share that with other local government areas is great, and I think it's wonderful. So I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? Carried. Councillors, that brings us to the end of this council meeting. I close the meeting and say, I close the meeting and I say thank you for your attendance. The General Manager now he's got another meeting that he's got to attend. And Jason, you wanted to do you want to do that behind closed doors? Or?
Yeah, no, it's only stuff here.
Is everything turned off?